at a broader level, nonprofit news enables much more coverage of issues and topics that perhaps a for-profit model would not allow. So, for example, you can look at incentives of a for-profit model versus a nonprofit model. When you go on the internet and you're looking for news, you're going to get served a lot of interesting things from a for-profit model. At the end of the day, they're based, their business model is based on ad revenue and they need clicks. How can people click in? Well, you can sensationalize a topic or, you could use some clickbait, maybe a very attractive photo or something just to get people to come in and be on your website for a little bit and then leave. Our currency is really impact.
Welcome to the Mongabay newscast. I'm your co-host, Mike DiGirolamo, bringing you weekly conversations with experts, authors, scientists, and activists working on the front lines of conservation, shining a light on some of the most pressing issues facing our planet and holding people in power to account. This podcast is edited on Gadigal land. Today on the newscast, we speak with Dave Martin. He is Mongabay's Director of Philanthropy, or in other words, the force behind much of Mongabay's fundraising efforts. We talk a lot on this show about how we are a nonprofit news outlet and that we rely on the generosity of readers and listeners like you to keep the lights on and bring you independent news from nature's frontline. It's fair to say it wouldn't be possible without someone like Dave. And yet, it's always a little surprising that our nonprofit model isn't as widely known. Well, today, Dave explains it, how it works, and why it is vital, not just for Mongabay, but journalism as an institution, how it enables impact-driven news as opposed to sensationalism. Now, I reached out to Dave to do this interview because I felt he had something important to say, and I was not disappointed. If you've ever needed a primer on how nonprofit journalism drives impact and how you can support independent news, whether it's Mongabay or another outlet you admire, this is a conversation for you. David, it is great to have you with us, and welcome to the Mongabay newscast. Before we launch into it, please introduce yourself and let our listeners know who you are and what you do here at Mongabay.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. So my name is Dave Martin. I've been with Mongabay going into my 10th year. I am right now the Director of Philanthropy. I was the first development hire at Mongabay. Our CEO, Rhett Butler, hired me. Well, we started having conversations back in 2015, maybe even as early as 2014. And yeah, it has been really rewarding to watch the organization grow and become more dynamic. And this has been great to see. So I'm really pleased to be here, and it's an honor to be on the podcast with you, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for being here. So can you give us a little bit more detail into as much as you can, of course, about what it is you do and how you go about it?
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, what I do is I fundraise on behalf of Mongabay. So more specifically, we're fundraising for independent journalism. So there's a lot of caveats there and there's a lot to understand, but that's at a very basic level what I do. How do I go about doing it? Well, I would say on a personal level, I guess I would call myself a relational fundraiser. So kind of a quality over quantity type person. I really seek to find and engage in and build trusting relationships with funding organizations and individuals who want to support independent journalism about the environment.
There's a few threads we're going to pull on there. Before we get further into that, though,
sure.
Why do you work for Mongabay? Because, you have a unique connection to nature that I think is worth exploring. And, your background is so interesting. What brought you eventually to work with Mongabay?
Well, going way back in time, I've just always loved nature. as a kid. We would go camping for a lot of our vacations, spend a lot of time in the Sierra Nevadas, go fly fishing with my dad. I was always interested in herps. So I was, as a kid, and I don't do this anymore because I know better about having a smaller footprint, but I used to, turn over rocks and logs looking for lizards and salamanders and snakes. So that was pretty foundational for me. I think I've just always felt a deep connection and empathy with wildlife. I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding and a sense of separateness that kind of us human beings have with our natural environment. And, for some reason, maybe it's experiential or, I don't know exactly why, perhaps something innate or just an understanding that occurred to me at some point. I've never felt a huge sense of separateness with nature. So I have a kind of a sense of responsibility to where I want to contribute to protecting it. So that's going way back. That is the foundation of why I do everything I do. So I thought it was worth kind of going in there a little bit. I would say on a career level, what was foundational for me is in my mid to late 20s, I had the opportunity to move to Ecuador and live in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So while I was there, my heart was captured and, I was surrounded by this just immense biodiversity and biocultural diversity as well. Meeting local people, understanding, the very, very unique set of threat that was going on in that part of the world and trying to figure out a way where I could contribute to helping. That was a big driver in the rest of the course of my career. Eventually, like I said, I reached out to Rhett and he brought me on as the first development person. But where that happened actually was interesting. I met Rhett. I worked at this company called Runa. And have you had guayusa tea before?
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Are you caffeine sensitive?
I wouldn't call myself actually. I probably drink a little bit too much coffee, but yeah, I love guayusa tea.
Yeah, so me too. Although I don't drink caffeine anymore. At the time, it had held this real significance for me because I was drinking it when I was in the Ecuadorian Amazon. I eventually got brought into a company to kind of sell it and bring it to market here in the United States. And I was really attracted to the mission. It was, all about working with local communities, doing, agroforestry type cultivation and all this stuff. So I was really into it. But at the end of the day, it didn't work out for me because I was just selling, bottles of tea to a grocery manager at Albertsons or Whole Foods or something. And they weren't really super interested in impact. But when I reached out to Rhett, I knew he was going to have Mongabay's first gala. And I think this was 2015. This was my pitch to Rhett. I said, I've been following you for a long time. I've learned a lot from Mongabay. I'm probably one of the biggest Mongabay fanboys there is. I think it's really critical that people are going to be awake and alert while they're listening to you speak at the gala, because it's kind of like later evening on like a Tuesday or something. So I said, could I please come and, serve guayusa tea while you're talking to people about Mongabay? So he brought me in and that's where I really met Rhett for the first time. And I think he kind of sensed at the very least, even if I didn't have a huge amount of formal fundraising experience, I do have a background in grassroots fundraising, that I had the energy that it would take to kind of be successful at fundraising. So that's kind of how I got brought in.
Thanks for tuning in to listen to the first few minutes of this podcast. There is a lot more to this interview, but if you want to hear the full conversation, find the Mongabay newscast wherever you get your podcasts from and click subscribe. You can also get each new episode straight to your inbox by subscribing to Mongabay's weekly newsletter at mongabay.com. And if you really want to support us, you can donate to us at patreon.com/Mongabay. Don't forget to leave a review, and thank you, as always, for listening.